Hello, and welcome back to the Females Thriving Over 30 podcast. Today we're joined by the lovely Emma Jane. So, Emma, could you introduce yourself and just tell us a bit about you?
My name's Emma Jane. As you can tell from the dulcet tones, I'm from the north of England. I have a 5 at the front of the number of the age, and that's what we're going to leave it at. So currently I'm working as a union official. So I'm one of these ones that likes to have a brazier and a strike picket line sort of thing. But I started life as an opera singer. I've worked at the MOD as a computer programmer. I've worked as an academic lecturing at universities for computing. I've basically done a bit of everything. It's a very, very varied life.
Opera singer.
Anything else you want
How
to
did
know?
you get into opera?
My granddad, my granddad raised me on Gilbert and Sullivan and little songs like that. And my grandfather or grandmother on my dad's side was also an opera singer. So I had singers on both sides of the family. My mother can't sing a note at all. It's pretty bad. But the Welsh genes came through from my father's side, and I just loved to sing, but I didn't think I could. My brother was always the one with the voice. He'd, Alec Jones, boy soprano sort of thing. And there was always me with, I never sang. But because the voice I've got now is the voice I had when I was like 8 and 9. And it's a really big contralto voice. So it belongs to a very big, very old woman like Ursula sort of thing. So I never did that. And I just sort of like sang by accident and then, got a bit carried away, got a bit into it. And I absolutely love performing. I love dramatics. So I started doing that until I could do it no longer because I obviously found out my diagnosis and I was going to be in a wheelchair. And wheels and the stage, not the best combination because wheels go like that on a stage because stages are always angled. So didn't want to end up in an orchestra pit, so I went into computing.
I absolutely love that. I have a theatre school background from when I was younger, so I'm very much into the stage. I'm into performing. That's why I think I ended up in pageantry too, because it was kind of my way to be on stage without having to sing anymore. Because unlike you, I'm actually not a very good singer at all. I thought I was. It's like the opposite way around. I thought I was when I was young, and then I discovered I couldn't really sing very well at all, so I stopped. But I absolutely love that you did that. And what is it that you do specifically within computing?
I'm a data nerd. I find databases and programming incredibly sexy and fun. Very few people agree with me. So I started off as a database developer. So I was a DBA and a computer programmer. So I worked on MOD systems and things that require lots of security clearance. And I kind of just worked my way through that. And then my mother decided that she didn't want her little girl being alone in London, which I quite liked. So she applied for me to do different jobs. And I got this job interview and I said, Mother, why have I got a job interview in the northeast of England? She went, oh, you can do it, pet. What is the job, Mother? Nothing I was qualified for whatsoever. I got the job though, and I managed to make it work. But it was like, oof. So my mother made me come home. She wanted a little girl around. Excuse the dog barking in the background there.
It's fine. I couldn't hear it. So you have a very interesting background. And as you said, you just come from opera to computers. Is that the life that you imagine for yourself? Or is that something that just sort of happened?
It's kind of a bit of both. So I was raised by a small but perfectly formed Welshman and my mother, who's a northern woman. And I was raised, it sounds awful now, I was raised with the expectation that I would be a housewife and look after my man and sit at home and have children. So I always thought, oh, I'll be a stay-at-home mum. I'll be a little domesticated goddess. And I'm not in the slightest. There's too much of my father's strong-willed, contrary personality within me. And I just thought, why? I don't want to be beholden to anyone telling me that I have to ask them for money. So I wanted my own money. I wanted my own career. I wanted to be in control of my own life. So I kind of broke away from the expectations of my little traditional family and went, I can do it because you told me I can't, so I'm going to do it regardless. So I kind of like went to university. I was the first one in my dad's family to go to uni. And to be fair, for all my dad wasn't the most feminist of men, he did always say we had to have a good education, and he didn't care what we did or what level we got to, but we had to try our best. And if we tried and failed, fabulous. But if we didn't try, then we were letting ourselves down. So when I went to university, I kind of just from there realized I could be so much more than I thought. And it's mixed because when I look back now, thinking I thought, oh, I deserve to be more than a housewife, which sounds awful because I couldn't do what my mother did. I don't like children. I've got one, and she only survived teenage years because I hadn't got a spare, and I just couldn't do all that juggling of looking after children, rotoring. I mean, I don't know how my mother did it, and you never get a day off because when you're on holiday, mum isn't. So I'm really quite glad it didn't go down that route. I sometimes look back now and think, how did I put my mother's job down so much? Because it was a job without retirement benefits. So I'm quite glad I went down that route now and ended up with just one child. And I'm not a natural stay-at-home type. I'm not. So I kind of just like fell into it. And then every time I did something, I wanted to do something else. And, I was diagnosed then with ADHD. I mean, shocker, on the spectrum, which means that I do everything full on and then, oh, look, shiny. And I go and do something else full on. So I've kind of like done a bit of everything, always been fully intense. And then, oh, what else can I do? But I've got to the point now where I'm happy in where I am and I love my job and I love where my future's going. It just took a meandering route to get there.
I love what you said there about like going full steam ahead into the things that kind of take your fancy, because I've always been quite similar. I can really relate to that. But I thought it'd be good to ask you about kind of, some people might be scared to do that. Some people might be stuck in a certain job or in a certain phase of their life, maybe want to have a change, but are a bit maybe more nervous of jumping both feet into things like that. So what kind of advice would you give to people that might be feeling scared to try something new?
It depends on the background. So I was lucky because I always had supportive parents, although I'm fairly certain my father still hasn't got over the shock that when I married, I kept my name. And he didn't like that at all. I had separate bank accounts. Like, I've earned that money, I'm spending it. But I knew whatever I did, whatever went wrong, I had that safety net. And the one thing I raised my daughter to do is, first of all, to know you can always come home. There's always a spare room there. You might have to share it with some pageant dresses and a couple of dogs, but there's always space for you there. The other advice I gave her was never, ever be reliant on anyone else to pay your bills. So for me, it was kind of, I wanted her to learn from my interesting past. So I was married at 30 and divorced at 32. I left with my daughter. It was a whole saga and, protection orders, all that sort of stuff. And if I hadn't been working, I would never have been able to leave. So my attitude is always have a safety net. And if it's not your parents, have a cash bank. So you always need to be able to know that you are never solely reliant on anybody else. Because I know that even now, if I needed to, I could sell my house and I could go and live in a one-bedroom flat. So I always have options. And to be fair, when I married again for a second time, and I was then widowed at 36, and then widowed again at 43. So basically now my family call me Henry VIII. But if I hadn't had that attitude of I've always got a safety net and I know I can rely on me, I would have been in a really bad space. I would have been trapped in a bad marriage with a child, or I would have been left destitute, thinking, "What am I going to do? I'm going to lose the house. I'm going to lose everything." Whereas I always knew, worst comes to the worst, I can cover the bills. And I don't have a flash life. I've got a little ex-council house. It's not posh. It's in a little dodgy area. It's you lock the doors when you drive up the street, but it's mine. And I know I could afford to run it if I ever got redundant or if I ever got to the point where I couldn't work for ill health. And that's always my advice. Never, ever let anybody else be responsible for your happiness and your security. But that's really hard to do and very easy to say. So you kind of got to have that grounding to go back
No,
to.
absolutely. Yeah, no, absolutely. Everything that you said is just so true and so important. This is something that my mom always told me when I was little. First was like, never stop working. So don't become a housewife. Make sure that you're always have a job so you can have your income. So in the worst case scenario, you always have your money to live whatever situation you're in that you might not be happy in. And as you said, like make sure that you have your safety net and all of that. And I just I couldn't stop laughing when you said about Henry VIII. That is just like the funniest kind of thing I've heard in the whole day. So thank you so
We
much
have
for
a
making me
very
laugh.
twisted, we've got a very twisted
So
sense of humour.
obviously,
Yeah, our family's very dark. But when Mike died, my
I
brother
think like what
came round. He came on at midnight in his pajamas with his dog collar on, knocked on the door and said, "Is this where the Merry Widow lives?" And he literally died that day. Well, it's just, it was just, we deal a lot with humour in our family, and not many people get it, but it's kind of like, that's our love language, taking the mickey out of each other.
I love that you just obviously said all of that about keeping your own money, keep working and stuff, because I think this is important to remind, especially all the younger women that might be listening to our podcast, that is very important for them to do, that it doesn't matter maybe how much you love someone, you need to make sure that you are safe on and be able to survive by yourself in case the worst scenario ever happens.
I was going to say, the other piece of advice that I gave my daughter, and I think it's something that we just don't have in today's society, is if you can't pay for it, don't buy it. Because nowadays it's so easy to put things on a credit card and you end up then. And again, it's all about keeping your options open. Because if you've got things on a credit card, you can't leave your job. You can't cope if somebody else goes. You have to, it imprisons you. But if you know that you clear your card in full every month, treat it like a debit card, not a credit card. And if you pay it in full each month, what happens then is you build up your credit rating. So your mortgage is easy to get. I mean, my daughter, bless her, is a little eccentric child, but, well, she's a big child, but she bought her own house at 21. And she did that purely because she had a very controlling mother.
That's great.
So from the minute she started work, she paid me £200 a week rent, because it costs £1,000 to run a small house. And if you get used to spending your disposable income, you're never going to be able to save for a deposit. So she paid me for 3 years pretty much £200 every week out of her paycheck. And when she was 21, I gave her it all back in a lump sum as a deposit to buy a house. So she was used to not having to struggle, because she always knew, this is my disposable income, £2.50 a week for a latte. And that was it. It's kind of these groundings that you need to change the capitalist and the commercial sense of society and say, I don't need it, I'm going to save up for it. Because it's fun. When you save up for it, you appreciate it so much more. When you work out, actually I've worked, to buy those pairs of those shoes I want, those heels, they are £70. That's 10 hours work, or however much it is on minimum wage. It puts it into context that people don't necessarily appreciate the value of now. I'm very old for my age there.
I think that's such great advice, and definitely, like, I have a young child, so she's not even, well, she's 3 in June, so a little bit, it's a little bit of a while away before I'm going to be needing to teach her these things. But definitely some of the things you've mentioned are stuff that I would pass on to my child as well, because I think even more so as time's gone on, the more it's like pushed on us that we need all these material things, especially with the rise in social media, and seeing all these things people own and all the new clothes they've got all the time. I think it really pushes that consumerism onto us. So I think
Yeah.
it's so important to think about what you actually do need.
The pictures at Christmas when they've got mountains of parcels, and I'm started thinking, okay, because I mean, I when I left her father, I had nothing, absolutely nothing. So he took everything. So we had a rule from when she was about 4, and the rule was, it makes it sound so tight, but I've raised a child who is not at all impressed with money or commercialism. So the rule was you got the Argos catalogue out at the beginning of December and you circled everything you wanted under £50. And if it was more than £50, you circled with a red pen, and that was for Granny. Because then, that was my budget. Her birthday and her Christmas were in the same pay cycle. Very bad planning. So what we used to do, I used to make themes. So she wanted a Leap Pad, one of these little books that you write and read with. So I got her a Leap Pad. My brother got her some of the accessories. My mother bought her something else. So all of her presents linked in together. And even now, we spent years making presents. We used to sit there in the kitchen and make sweets. We'd make toffee and we'd make fudge, and and the ultimate is Turkish delight. 5 hours stirring Turkish delight. But we made them, we bagged them, we decorated them. And so she's always been raised that it doesn't matter. But I always wanted to, because I came from a very poor background. I mean, I remember the pecking order for food was, in the 70s, Dad was always on strike, never got a full week's pay. Dad got fed first, then my younger brother, because he was the boy, then me as the eldest child, and my mother would often go without. So 2 to 3 days a week, we had to go to Granny's because we didn't have enough food. So although I didn't want her to have that sense of deprivation, because it makes me sound like I was born in the workhouse era, but I wanted her to appreciate money. So she does everything. So I know you said your daughter was on like 3 or 4. She knew from a very early age what things cost. So she had dance lessons, and she knew that, because she did. It sounds so bad. She did 19 hours of dance a week. It's not even a joke. She did dance 6 days a week because the child never gets tired. So she danced all the time. Well, her dance lessons, I taught singing and musical theatre at the dance school to pay for her dance lessons. So she knew that Mum had to work 7 days a week, 3 jobs to pay for her dance lessons and also her schooling, because she was a unique child, shall we say. So she went to an all-girl private school, which I don't think ever recovered from having the experience of this child with bright pink hair and an attitude of independence. But she knew the value of everything. She knew that we had no more than £60 a month to spend on food. So we made everything. And she grew up not knowing that we were tight, but knowing that everything had a value and that Mum worked. And her work ethic is second to none. Because I got mine from my dad and she got hers from me. And I just think that's how kids appreciate things. It's not the money. It's about the handmade cards, the gifts, the time. It's all that. And I think we lose that so easily now with the phones and that sort of stuff. She was 22 before she got an iPhone. She bought it herself. Because I was going, I'm not paying that. Oh, you're joking, you'll break it. I was a horrible and strict mother.
I completely agree with so many things you've said, though. I even tell people now, especially with my daughter being not even 3, when Christmas and birthdays come around, she's the only child in our family, really, in both mine and my husband's family. So everybody wants to buy lots of things. But I always say to them, if it's like, there was an experience of a Christmas where she'd got lots of stuff at once, and then she didn't really care about any of it because I felt like she didn't really know what to play with. Whereas actually, at a time where I've given her just one present, she'll sit and play with it all day, and she cherishes it, and it makes a big difference. So I've been encouraging people to just get one special thing, or put money towards something and give her one present, and we're going to Orlando place this year, $100 or something for experiences and stuff like that.
Yeah. But I think if families talk to each other, it depends on the type of family you've got, but my daughter, Esme loves Sylvanian families. I'm saying nothing. If she watches this, she's going to be mortified. But at 23 years old, this girl still has the panda family on her table. It's still there. She's still going, plays it around, it moves around the house. I'm going, honey, you're 23, and I'm not allowed to throw any of them out. I've got a cupboard full of everything with Sylvanian families. But it meant that if anyone wanted to buy anything, it was like, oh, can you get this family? Can you get that family? And they all club together. So when you come to Christmas Day, everything interlinks. And then nobody feels bad that they can't afford a present or they can't afford a big one. If you've only got a £5, fabulous. Do you know what? Why don't you, hand knit or hand sew a garden or something that we can put the hotel on? And it is all about that sort of thing. Or to be honest, just, let's go out for the day, can we, because a lot of my family didn't have a particularly affluent background. And we would say, do you know what? Let's have, we'll go to the park with us. Come out for the day with us. Your gift will be the picnic. And then they can put everything into this picnic, and there's no pressure to have the money. We just want to have fun with them. And it means they can push me up the hills because I'm not going up a hill. It's a lot of hard work on the arms.
And the thing is, I do think that most of the feeling of needing to get all this stuff does come from the parents, and it's because we see other parents, like you say, you see the piles of stuff on Christmas Day and things like that, and you probably feel like you're not being as good a parent if you're not being able to provide those same things for your child. But actually, a child cares about being loved and somebody spending time with them and giving them attention and care, and that is what they really do care about. So I think sometimes the focus is on the wrong thing. So I think you're absolutely right about making stuff together, making gifts. All of that is the stuff they'll remember from their childhood, which is really special. So you've said a lot about having to be kind of like, I guess you've talked about being resourceful in terms of when you had your daughter growing up and stuff. So have you got any other tips on like how people can be more resourceful in life so that they can still do the things they want without having to spend all the money or whatever it might be?
For me, it's about always having another string to your bow. So you always have to have. So I know. So when I was a student, I worked in the chip shop, and don't be above yourself either, because no one is better than anybody else. And to be perfectly honest, I have cleaned tables, I have stacked shelves, I have done whatever I needed to be, and I've never ever looked down on anybody. Because as far as I can see, the only way the higher echelons work is if there's somebody cleaning underneath, because otherwise, who's going to open the door? So for me, it was always a case of what could I do. So I knew that although I'm an academic, I like to collect qualifications, but I also know that if all else failed and I lost my job or got made redundant, which I had in the past, I can do private teaching. I can go into an agency and I can teach maths and I can teach English and I can teach singing, and you can turn your hobbies into an emergency sideline. So if you like dance, if you like guitar or whatever your interest is, that if you get good enough at it, so you stick at it and you persevere at it, that can always be an emergency money in the meter sort of thing, because you can always give lessons. And it's back to that commitment. My biggest thing is, whatever you start, you have to finish. So if you're going to invest money in preparing for things, and my mother always said this, you can do any hobby you want, but you will practice every day and you will not quit within a year. So we did that, and that meant that every day we were doing the saxophone, or we were doing the clarinet, and we were doing all these things. But you get past, it gives you a sense of determination, because you have to, not everything comes to you. You have to be prepared to work your way up, and you have to always be prepared to have that alternative strategy if you need to. Just give yourself more options. But also, you start at the bottom and work. Nobody is, owes you a successful career, because anybody who got to the top got there by graft, and you don't get to the top, or you shouldn't get to the top, because you don't get onto the top by climbing and pushing people down, because you never know who you need. And those people who you climb over, you want them to pick you up, because you want them to be supportive and building you up, because the top person, the top of the pyramid, is only as strong as the people on the bottom. If you have an inverted pyramid, it's going to fall. So you have to big everybody up on the way. That you have to have that sense of, people say be kind, but it's not. It's being, treat others as you want people to treat you, or treat your granny. Because if you wouldn't want someone to treat your mother like that, or your dog, because often I think we put up a lot of ourselves. We don't often like ourselves enough to think we deserve more. But if anyone went for our mum or our gran or our dad, we would be at it. Treat everyone as you would want somebody to treat them, because that's the only way to succeed.
Yeah,
There's more to happiness than
absolutely.
money.
I love
Happiness
that. I
is
love that
not
saying.
being successful in a job. Happiness is having a job that you love. You want to look forward to work each day, not think, oh, another week, how long till Saturday? If you don't enjoy it, you're just having a long death.
yeah. I agree with so many things that you just said. I think something that I've learned definitely is that success, like money or certain title or whatever, doesn't equal success, and success is different for everyone, and success can be happiness. Success doesn't have to be your job or the money you earn or the house you have or anything like that. And then also what you said about treating everybody the same. I think it's so important to remember we are all literally humans. Me and my husband always say it's like we're all still children and we're just role playing different jobs and things that we have in life. We are all fundamentally the same underneath. We're all the same. We're all humans. We all deserve the same respect. So I think that's something that's really important to remind yourself, especially if you do become really successful.
Absolutely.
It's remembering that everyone else around you is just as important as you are.
And plus, it's only
and then there was one more thing.
Oh, sorry.
Sorry, go ahead.
It's only really look that means that you're not the person begging on the street. It's sheer look of birth, either because you've been brought into a privilege, or you've got a loving parent, or whatever it's going to be. It's my granny used to always say, "There for the grace of God, but go I," because basically you're there. We're lucky to be where we are, and even if you're at the bottom, there are so many people who are rich and successful, but have really empty lives and no real friends. I know I don't have I'm not rich and wealthy, but I've got some of the best friends ever. And I have a very small circle of friends, but I know that if anything goes wrong, I can count on them. Probably to be in the jail cell next to me, but I've got people I can always rely on, and that's much more important than anything else.
Yeah. And we naturally as humans need like community. So I think making sure that you have those people around you is so important. And you talked about like being dedicated to something and working hard towards like hobbies and things like that. And there was something that I saw recently that said it was about having children, and it was saying don't ever let your child quit a hobby on a bad day. But I think it goes for anybody, in the sense that, if it's a bad day at work, if your child's had a bad day at a new hobby, don't let them quit then. Make them go back, or you go back, and then make the decision on a good day when you've had a good experience. So because it might just be that day was a bad day, and if you quit then it might not have been the right time.
And I think it's more than that, particularly for women, and I'm dealing with this with a few of the teenagers I kind of deal with, is that struggling a teenager up to about the age of 30 really can't make a sensible decision, because if I think back to when I was that age, the mood swings, the absolute sheer pit of despair and that dark cloud of gloom, and you've got that gnawing in your stomach, and you start thinking, it took me years to think, is that me or is that my hormones? And it takes a while to say, okay, we have to take a step back and be logical. And it does take a lot of years to kind of say, do you know what? This is just me having a moment. I'm going to park that and come back to it, because we do make impulsive decisions. I've made a fair few impulsive decisions in my life. But it is about saying, giving yourself permission to step back, because we drive ourselves on. And particularly as women, we hold ourselves to a much higher standard than anybody else. We've been told from a very early age what we should do, what we should look like, how we should behave. We should be polite. We should be this. We should be that. And everything, all the culture is all about putting the blame on us. And it sounds awfully sexist, and it's not meant to be. But if you think of what we tell our children, we tell our children, don't go out at night, keep your keys in your fingers, keep this. And the focus is all on people like women keeping an eye out. We don't do the same sort of thing to men. We don't say to our sons, don't go up and hackle women, don't do this, don't do that, don't ogle. So we spend a lot of time on that blame culture, and we have to give ourselves permission to say, I can only control what I can control. I can control my impulsivity. I can make that decision in a little while. I can control how I respond to what you've made me feel like. I can choose, most importantly, to cut you out because you're not enhancing my life. And I think we need to remind ourselves, actually, that is our right to do. And I think women particularly, we put up with a lot of stuff because we don't feel as if we're entitled to that respect or that treatment or better, or it's our fault and we brought it on ourselves. And to be fair, I think it takes to the menopause before you get to that point where you're thinking, I care not anymore, But I do think we need to, that's one thing that we need to focus on. Give yourself permission to forgive yourself and not beat yourself up.
Yeah, I definitely relate to that in terms of I grew up feeling like I needed to always be nice, which is obviously, it's true, you do always need to be nice to an extent, but I always feel, even now, I struggle with the fact sometimes, even if somebody's upset me, I feel like I need to be nice, or it's like a people pleasing tendency. But I do think, especially as girls, we're almost taught that we need to be nice and smile at everyone and be nice,
I
and
apologise
it
for everything.
just not always appropriate.
I'm always apologising, going, "Oh, I'm sorry." It's like, no, you walked into me. Why am I apologising to you?
Yeah,
But instinctively, that's what we do. And if you think back to the, maybe not so much now, but I'm very old. If you think back to my generation, we always had that nursery rhyme. Sugar and spice and all things nice. That's what little girls are made for. So, frogs and snails, and puppy dogs' tails. That's what boys are made of. So the instinct is always, we're told or ingrained that we are princesses, we are girly. I was never a girly girl. I was the one that looked at my mother, bless her. She always hoped for a little princess, and what she got was a ragamuffin. You could put me in no matter what you dressed me in, I'd look like a scruff bag. The hair would be up here, I'd have beans down my face, I'd have my skirt tucked in my knickers, and I'd be covered in mud. And I'd only just come out the bedroom. So bless her, I feel her pain now. We're trying to get Esme into a pageant. But it's that type of thing. We're always told this is what you should do. And I think the hardest thing is to break the stereotypes. And as a parent, the biggest challenge I had as a parent is and it killed me, not living my life, not living Esme's life for her. Because when you can see the car crash that is about to happen because you've been in that car crash, and you don't know how to stop them making that same mistake, and you have to sometimes just let them, because we are who we are because we've made the mess ups, we've made the mess, but it is, as a parent, it is hard to try and say, let me do this, do that, and take control, when it's really they need to
yeah,
learn. Because
Yep.
it's a saviour complex. We want to stop them going through what we do because we don't want our kids to suffer. And in reality, suffering gives you strength, and that's a cliche, but it's kind of true.
yeah,
I wanna
yeah.
I wanna circle back to one of the things that you said at the beginning, that your dad told you about. Make sure that you try things even if you fail. I think it's a very important message that we need to talk about and make sure that people know that it's okay to try things, it's okay to fail, that we're learning from those failures. So, where are some examples of things that you have tried and maybe failed so people can maybe relate to you?
Apart from winning the crown, I'm just saying, it is kind of, it's everyone has failed. I've failed so much, so much. People look at me now and they look at my career and my CV and they go, "Oh, you're so bright." I didn't. I failed at school. I got average GCSEs. I was the first year to do GCSEs, and I got average ones. I got average A levels. I got an average degree. I got, what I did was I used every average to better, to go up the stepping ladder. And I think now, it's not a failure if you don't get A's, because to be perfectly honest, universities don't care. They don't care if you've got 3,000 A levels. What they want is, have you learned? Can you study? Because whatever we taught you at college, we need to undo that and teach you the way we need you to teach it at university. And also, sometimes it's what we define as failure. I wanted
Yeah.
all my life to be on the stage. I wanted to be Liza Minnelli and Julie Garland. I was there. I had the high kicks and the fishnets and everything. But that wasn't to be. Not because I couldn't, but because my body wouldn't let me. Because I ended up with my father's genetics, the gift that keeps on giving, and I ended up with ankylosing spondylitis, and I was diagnosed at 19, and normally you're diagnosed at 40, and it's very rare in women, so I'm special in many ways. So at 19 or 20, I learned that what I wanted for my life, I was never going to have. Now, that wasn't me failing, that was a route or an avenue that I dreamed of and wanted to go down, closing. So a failure would have
Mhm.
been for me to wallow in self-pity and just sit there bemoaning the fact that I couldn't do what I wanted to do. The success is to say, okay, I'll go and do a master's, I'll go and do this, I'll go and do the other. And then when I was in industry and I didn't industry is cutthroat, and I'm a woman in an industry that's computing. So I was the only woman in my department, and there was like 150 male programmers and me. And they would haze all the women. Now I was lucky because I was raised by a Welsh misogynist, so there was nothing they could say that I hadn't already been exposed to. So I could give as good as I got. But I saw women hazed out in a matter of weeks. They would join and they couldn't put up with the banter. I would give the banter straight back to them. So I did that and I went forward, but it was hard because you have to be twice as good as any man, and also you had to get over the stereotypes. So it seems like, you know, I would sit in the bar in the cafe with the lads, and they would talk about women. I was going, excuse me, ovaries here. I'm a woman, and they said, oh, you're not a woman, you're EJ. And I know they meant that in a nice way, but it wasn't. And when I left industry to go into academia, I had to leave industry, not because I wasn't capable, but because I had a child. And the job I was doing, I would have to fly out to the States or overseas at literally 2 hours' notice. I had a visa and a passport and a fly bag in the back of my car all the time because I ran the software engineering group, and I was software support or tech support for as a high ranking DBA for overseas sites. So if their system went down, they could either pay $2,000 a day for support or fly me over on salary, and I was cheaper. So I'd have to go. You can't do that when you have a child, because it kind of interferes with the whole breastfeeding thing. So my failure was they said to me I had to choose. If I wanted my career, I couldn't have the child. If I was to return to work after maternity leave, I know those faces. It did cost me a lot in the tribunal. But they said basically I had to be desk bound. I'd have to change roles to be UK based, northeast based desk bound. Essentially, not changing my salary, but taking away the status and the responsibility that I had because I was simply a mother. Now that was a failure, but it would have been a bigger failure to stay and put up with that environment. What I did was say, fine, you know what? Okay. And I went on to a job that paid significantly less, but had much more stability. So I went from industry where it was constant high stress, constant, you know, on the go, but a really nice high salary, to go into academia, which is much more reliable, a lot less pay, but security. So it's what you see as failure. I don't see anything as being as a complete utter failure, because everything that I've failed at, I've just turned. It's failure is about what you perceive. You know, you might practice something and say, you know what, I will never, ever, ever be Fred Astaire. I'm not going to be that tap dancing wizard. You know, does that mean that after 2 years or 5 years or 10 years of doing tap dancing lessons, you failed? No. If you've reached the best of your potential, that is not a failure. That is you reaching your maximum potential, identifying your limits and taking it and using it forward. Because everything we do, you can take something from. You know, if you have a hobby that you're no good at, do you know what you can do? You learn then how to mix in a group and how to improve yourself, and more importantly, how to acknowledge your limits. Because you want to know when it's time for you to move before you become labeled by people. So failure is a perspective. You know, what people say is failure, I might say is just life. It's the universe saying, go and have a nice job that gives you lots of holidays in the summer.
No, absolutely, absolutely. I mean, I think I'm really enjoying this conversation. I don't know if it's maybe Jasmine, you might have a different perspective as well about this, but I feel like all the people that we have talked to in the podcast so far have brought a lot of wisdom, a lot of lessons, a lot of really good chats and time. And I don't know if that is because we're over 30. What do you think? Do you think like we would be this way and have this way of talking and so much wisdom if we were younger?
We have the confidence, but we wouldn't have the wisdom. You know, and there's a big difference, because I obviously I've spent years dealing with teens and early 20s, and they say things with confidence, and I'm thinking that is wrong. You are wrong. You know, and there's a sense of arrogance that you kind of lose as your wisdom increases, because what you tend to find as you grow older, and as life throws you every curveball it can, you realize that you don't know everything. And to be perfectly frank, I'm Gen X, so I was raised as a feral child. I might have, you know, my mother might have been a nice little housewife, and my dad was, a blue collar worker. But I was raised in that era where you were kicked out the house in the morning because it was playtime. And if you came in, are you in or you're out? Make your mind up. This is you weren't born in the barn, and it's that sort of like, I think that self-reliance that you can't do now because it's just not safe. We didn't have that sense of fear, or we had to essentially raise ourselves to a certain extent. We couldn't be bored. We didn't have half the stuff they have now. I used to go up and down the street playing shop in my head and talking to the bushes and paying for things with petals. I mean, I'd probably be locked up nowadays, but we made our own entertainment and we became self-sufficient because you had to be, and everything we did was from scratch. And I think that, we were old before our time. I think that's what the 40s and 50s were now. But I think the attitude now coming through, and I don't know whether it's good or bad. I can't, my instinct is to say get a grip, but really what we have now is people coming through that have higher expectations of their position. There is no ranking structure anymore. I was raised to respect your elders, but that didn't mean kowtowing. That meant look at people who have lived the life that you need to live. Learn from them. They're not wiser. They're older and more experienced. It's not an intelligent thing. It's let them teach you because they're about to fall off that they've already fallen off that cliff that you're about to jump off. And I don't think we get that anymore. I think that respect for experience has ebbed a little bit. It'll come back, but I think, you must respect me. Well, why? You're 12, pet. It's that type of that assumption, that presumption that their opinion, yes, it should be respected, but does it hold the same weight as somebody who's lived it? And I think that ability to weigh up experience and therefore add value to an opinion and value to that experience, I don't think we have that anymore. And plus, you get to my age and you don't care anymore. It's like there's not enough HRT in the world to make me care. I say what I think, and if you don't like it, that's absolutely your. I have no problem with that. But this is what I think. You're entitled to your views. This is mine.
I'm just thinking because access to information now, because younger people have so much access to information. You're saying about you pretending to buy things at the shop and everything. It was still like that when I was young. I used to play in the back garden with a sweeping brush, pretending to be Annie in the orphanage, and I'd be sweeping up and singing Annie on the top of my lungs. Poor neighbours that had to listen to me. But I definitely still encourage imaginative play a lot with my daughter. I don't always use toys. I'll actually get her to pretend we're making ice creams from thin air and stuff, because I just think that's a really good lesson. But going back to the thing about young people now, I wonder whether because they feel like they can access all the information, they think, well, you don't know anything I don't know because I can Google it and look it up. But like you say, it's not actual lived experience, which is totally different to reading about it.
Yeah, and it's not even that it's not lived experience. It's not right. It's inaccurate. I mean, I taught computing for a number of years. I used to ban mobile phones and laptops in my computing lectures, and I taught computing because, if you I can touch type and hold a conversation. I can type something completely different to what I'm talking about. But the way that the body learns is it's very tactile. The human brain is programmed to learn through visualization. It's about, that act of simply writing notes engraves it into the brain. If you type it, you don't have that connection. It's a different style of learning. And what we used to do is, first of all, we'd ask. I mean, for a start, to be fair, I really thought my granddad was related to the king for many years because that's what you told me. But if we wanted information for book reports or school projects, we went to the library. We went and looked. And if you look now, they don't. If you ask them something, they don't even listen in lectures. I would be sitting there and I'd be asking them a question. And my lectures are very entertaining because this is me reined in for the lecture. You had 2 hours of this with jazz hands is what they used to get for a lecture. But they don't, I wouldn't let tablets. I didn't want people Googling. I want to know what you've read. I want to know what I've said to you that you've translated. If I'm giving you examples from my industry, it's not enough for me to say, this is what we should do. I need to say, this is what you should do. This is an example of when I did it wrong, and this is the consequence. But that learning doesn't come from just listening without, it doesn't work. And I think now I don't think access to information is the problem, because the data is wrong. And one of the examples I used to use when I was working is I would actually go on a Wikipedia page and edit it. So they would look up something that I had told them specifically to look up. They'd look at it on Google, look at it on Wikipedia. My page would come straight up, and it was all rubbish because I had written it. And it took them a while to realize that. The danger is not the knowledge. The danger is the presumption and the inability to fact check. The fact that now we never believed anything we were told. If somebody said something to us, we'd go and ask somebody else. That natural sense of, really? You don't have that anymore. There are checks and balances. People believe what Google says because Google says it. And the dangerous thing as well is that we learned, because we did so much more interaction with communities and people, and when you walk to school or shop, you met more people and you could pick up signs of people. Now you don't even know if what you're looking at on screen is actually the person they're talking to. There's so much danger in online reliance when you combine misinformation with a younger sense of arrogance and know-it-all attitude with the dangers of predators and the misuse of social media. There's a whole can of worms that combines into the perfect storm. So it's not one thing, it's the combination, and it's very, very hard to battle that. I was one of these mothers, again, just to the right of Genghis Khan for strictness, but my daughter, the rule now, and it's actually still the rule, she's 23, you couldn't have social media or a phone or any accounts that I could not have access to. I still have her logins for Facebook, Snapchat, Twitter, all Gmails, and I have all the access. And that was the rule. If you want social media, I'm not going to snoop, but I need you to know that I can, because that then, she would come to me sometimes and say, "I've had this message. What do you think?" And I'd go, "Block." But we need to have that connection with the younger generations, so that they actually, they don't think we are spying them. They don't go, "It's Big Brother." Don't say things like, "You don't have the right. I pay the bill. If you're in my house, I own the air that you breathe." Was my loving maternal attitude. And that was the rule. I had to check and balance because I need you to know that this is not a safe route. That you need to know what to look for. So the perfect storm that we have at the moment, I think in about 5 or 6 years, it'll come crashing down. I think there'll be a complete and utter reversal back to the way it was. Because I think it's going to have to peak and crash. But I worry that the catalyst of that step back is going to be too frightening. It's going to be something really big because it's just beyond control now.
Yeah. Oh my God. Should we go through to the last section of the podcast of the over 30 wisdom bolts and ask you the 2 questions for you to give to our audience? So the first question is for the younger generations. Okay. So what is a key piece of advice that you would give to women in their 20s?
You are better than any male counterpart. Because if you're working at the same level as them, you have to be better to get there. Don't let anyone steal your light. Don't let anyone say you can't do something, because the only person holding you back is you. So know your worth and know you can get it.
Love that. I love that. Okay, and now will be for everyone that is over 30. So what is one piece of unconventional advice that has helped you navigate your 30s?
Get HRT as soon as possible and ignore the 12-year-old doctor who won't let you. Basically, that's pretty much it. Yeah. Don't let anyone fob you off that, that you don't need anything. Because to be honest, we go through this, they say baby rain. No, there's nothing. It's not a hot flush. Nothing prepares you for menopause. Get on the HRT because you can rule the world. Other than that, menopause is also an excuse for insanity pleas if you commit a crime. So those are your options: HRT or insanity plea. Deeply unconventional. What can I say? 2 funerals, no convictions.
Love it. Jasmine, I don't know if you have any other question, or Emma, is there anything that we haven't talked about that you want to mention?
No, I think we've covered a fair. Don't ever give me an open-ended question. I go off on all sorts of tangents. But I think we've covered. I think we have words of wisdom from 3 of us.
You have been absolutely fantastic. I've loved it. I've loved hearing about your life and about all the lessons and everything. I think this has been really full of lots of different little learnings and experiences you've had and stuff. So thank you so much for coming on the podcast. I think this is going to be a really good listen for everyone.
Perfect. Well, thank you so much, Emma Jane, for being today in our podcast. And thank you for every single one of you that are listening to our episodes every single week. We really appreciate you. And you know now that apart from obviously listening to this podcast, you need to make sure that you leave us a review everywhere you can. You like the podcast, you go to our Instagram, Female Striving Over 30. You follow us, you answer any questions that we add on our stories, you interact with our post, and we're also on TikTok at Female Striving Over 30, where you're going to be able to see lots of behind the scenes, lots of clips from these interviews, as well as some special and mysterious other TikToks.
I was just going to say, yeah, I've had to do my first TikTok dance, so you need to be following the TikTok if you want to see that.
Yes. Yes, she was great. She was great. And many more are coming. So thank you so much for listening. And we'll see you next week with another episode of the Female Striving Over 30 podcast. Bye.